All right, this is part 4 of Little Book Stories, which is a limited series of 10 episodes that I am recording to essentially expand on the stories that I tell in my little book of Big Reasons to Love America. It's 10 chapters, 10 reasons. And the idea is to sort of give you stories that didn't make it into the book. Maybe they overlap a little bit. And maybe you read the book and you come to these videos and you want to see a more sort of multidimensional view narrated by me directly of the times, the places, or sometimes maybe you stumble upon this episode as a standalone, and then you go, oh, there's a book, and you can go get the book and enjoy it as well. So that's my hope. And today we're going to talk about another reason to love America, which is its spirit of entrepreneurship. Here we go. Hey, if you enjoy my podcast, you're going to love my weekly newsletter. Every week, I share strategies for success and significance because, let's be honest, who doesn't want both? We're talking life-changing wisdom that has transformed my life and the lives of people I've coached all over the world. You can start with the free version, but if you upgrade to the paid version, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early access to my monthly webinars, interviews with top experts, and even a signed copy of my book. Subscribe at christianrayflores.com. Your future self will thank you. The entrepreneurial spirit in America is really extraordinary and actually quite unique in the world. I just do not know another country. I've been to 42 countries so far. I do not know of another country that has this baseline of people who want to build something out of nothing, right? This baseline where the average person can dream to start a new company and they have idea for a startup or a book, for a project, an invention. When so many people, per whatever, 100,000 of a population have this kind of spirit about them. And I think it's extraordinary, and it produces an incredible competitive edge and a unique place, actually, for where people that have that same spirit, we're attracted to it, right? It's infectious. We learn from it, and we want to be with other people like that. And I learned about the spirit from a distance, from tens of thousands of miles away, in other continents, by reading books and seeing stories and just peeking into this parallel universe that was at the time just out of reach for me. But it was still inspiring. So the word entrepreneur comes from a word, it's a French word, and it basically means to undertake, right? So to start something. The story of the American immigrant, especially the early waves, are just so inspiring. If you get a chance, and if you haven't seen Taylor Sheridan's 1883, it's a TV series on Paramount Plus, go see it, because I think it's probably the most extraordinary account that is both tragic and inspiring and epic all at the same time, of a tale of how mostly European immigrants would come to the U.S. and they were just told very little. They were told that they were giving away land, right? Of course, no one told them when they signed up to do that and paid a lot of money to get here, that how hard it's going to be to actually go claim that land, that they would have nothing, like no infrastructure at all, to start a life here in the West, in the frontier lands. And also, no one told them, or very few people know, that it was already inhabited by some people who are willing to fight back, the Native Americans. And just to see the imagery and the stories from 1883, the TV series, it's extraordinary and inspiring, because so many people died. I mean, so many people didn't make it. They died before even laying eyes on the land that they were craving. And the places they came from, there was so much oppression, so much tyranny, so much poverty, that it really did attract the boldest of the bold, right? The bravest of the brave, that the people who were desperate and at the same time visionary to undertake something so dramatically intense and dangerous at the same time. As I said, my wife's great-grandfather, Ugo Perfetti, from an Italian family, 3 brothers basically boarded the same ship. And, at the time, you didn't have really a social safety net provided to those people. A lot of them immigrants now, they do, and there's ways to look at it, what's good, what's bad. But at the time, you knew that you can only rely on yourself and maybe some family member that was already there. So they moved. It took them weeks to get to America, and it was fascinating because we were in Italy. It was 3 or 4 years ago. We were in Italy. We were in Florence, and I've always told Deb, my wife, that hey, someday we're gonna go see your family, and when we're in Italy, we're gonna go find your extended family. And we had like some information, right? We had like a city, Fenano, which is in Tuscany, in the mountains of Tuscany. It's a small town. And we had an approximate place, like go to this street and there's like six houses down on the right. There's going to be the place for the Perfettis. We were in Florence and I was like, we're going to go see your family. I told you we're going to go see, and we're in Italy, we're going to go see your family. And she's like, I can't call them. I don't know if they're going to be there several hours by car. And I mean, a lot of people in Italy, they vacation in the summer, so maybe they're not even there. Should we do it? And I said, we'll do it. So as we were sort of preparing to do that, I pulled up, I said, okay, what do we know? And she goes, I know the name. I know when they immigrated, 3 brothers on a ship. That's it. That's all I know. And she knows what happened after, what they did and the careers they had in America and all of that. But we didn't know the details of the immigration. I'm like, oh, let me look it up. And it's just so amazing that we have the internet now. So in literally 15 minutes, I found the database of Ellis Island, and I put in the name and the year, and I found the name of the 3 brothers. Literally in the ship catalog, there's a photocopy of the names put in, the ages, when they parted, even a photo of the ship, La Provence. The history behind the ship, where it was built, how old it was. Actually, eventually, it was sunk during World War II, World War II, I believe, or one. Anyway, but it was sunk by a German submarine because it was repurposed for military purposes and stuff like that. I think he was carrying supplies. But anyway, I'm digressing here. But the idea is that all these people came that were very entrepreneurial by definition. They were starting something new. They were leaving something old. And it meant all kinds of uncertainty. And this is the baseline of America. This influenced heavily the cultural DNA of the country. And also there's this cultural DNA that is called the Protestant work ethic that was introduced early on. And it spread beyond the Protestant communities. And the idea was that you have this divine agency. You owe it to God. It's spiritual to do good work, right? It's a service to God. It's a responsibility to do good work, and you have agency and you have choice and you can create your own future. That culture of divine calling, for a vocation, was also inserted early on into the United States cultural DNA, the collective consciousness, and it spread and it took. And I think that is something that I observe. I grew up in all kinds of different places where the culture is just not that, right? The baseline, the normal person don't think of their work as divinely ordained, or they're not propelled by this zeal, right, for something higher, something bigger than themselves, in correlation to their work and their vocation. They're just not. And those cultures create a very different setup, right? They're not entrepreneurial cultures. On top of that, there are these layers of power, of control. It could be religious power, it could be state power, even family, tradition, where entrepreneurship is not applauded, is not elevated, it's not popular, right? So the culture in general tends to make the average person conform to something in existence, rather than tell them you can create something out of nothing. You can build something. So the cultures, you see those cultures in Latin America. You see them in even the Mediterranean, Western Europe, and the Mediterranean cultures are less industrious. They're very fun, but they're less industrious, less of a work ethic, less entrepreneurial than, let's say, cultures of Scandinavia, or where the Protestants had a bigger cultural imprint. You see cultures in Africa, and you can see then that the entrepreneurial spirit, if it doesn't gain critical mass, it does not produce the prosperity, and it produces a certain kind of government, certain kind of people, certain kind of society, and it does not produce the prosperity. So the reason I tell you of this, it's not good or bad, it just is. And living in the United States, I can see that spirit permeate the national consciousness, the national culture, where your average percentage of the population in the United States where people go, I'm going to start my own business, is way higher, off the charts higher, than the percentage of people who say the exact same thing, let's say in Mozambique or in Russia or in Poland, right, or in Spain. It's way, way, way higher, right? And I got that spirit, right? Again, from a distance. It's almost like there's a wavelength that I captured. And I remember sort of reading books or seeing a show on TV in Africa. And I think I tell that story maybe in the next chapter, but I'm going to mention it now because it's relevant. So imagine us living in this place that is one of the poorest countries on earth, right? And there was no TV. There was actually almost no stores. I'm going to talk about that in the next chapter as well. But the TV thing is very interesting because, my dad basically got this little TV set. It was probably this big. That's it. And we didn't have local TV, so he built an antenna, it was probably like a I don't know, maybe 25 foot, maybe a little bit smaller, steel, almost like tower over the house. And then he put an antenna that basically caught the signal from South African television and Swaziland, of all places. Swaziland, yeah, you probably don't even know what Swaziland is. It's a little tiny kingdom that is all completely surrounded by South Africa and has a small border with Mozambique. But it's a tiny kingdom where it was actually a king there. I think his name was Sobuza II, if I'm not mistaken. And he had like 70 wives or something like that. I mean, probably more. And they had TV there as well. And what they did is that they rebroadcasted a bunch of Western European and mostly American TV shows. So I remember, we would spend hours watching these things. And this is like after years of not having TV at all. And I would see these shows that were showing me a world that is so prosperous, where entrepreneurship is sort of the engine of it, where people drove these incredible cars and lived in amazing, houses and had these cities, went on cruises, right? Cruises. I never dreamt of a cruise like that. That wasn't even a reality, a possibility in my world. And I remember going, how is it that their life is so different from my life? How is that their reality is so different from my reality? And I was very curious. And eventually, sort of, when I ended up studying economics in Moscow years later, they taught us Adam Smith and free market economics. And I remember just connecting the dots of what I saw that was so attractive, so exciting to me, and the vehicle for that, how that happens, right? And I saw in the Soviet system, right, there's no upward mobility. There is none. And I saw that, you can't, entrepreneurship is actually illegal. And I saw that you can do something, eventually sort of loosened a little bit, and you were able to sort of buy and sell things on your own. And it's all very fuzzy, what's legal, what's not, okay? And we took advantage of that because we did not want to live. We sort of grew up all over the world, and we didn't want to live in this very constrained place where everything is run by the government. And as I think I mentioned in previous episodes, that your average salary was 150 rubles a month, dollars a month on average. And so what we would do is we became these amateur entrepreneurs, and we'd go to take a train to East Berlin, and we would have some hard currency, which was very hard to come about. And we would cross over and would buy VCRs, computers, tape recorders, things like that were popular, and you couldn't find them in the Soviet Union. And we would then bring them over and it was just me and my sister, like two teenagers. It wasn't even my mom. because she couldn't cross. And we would sell them, and this we would live for a whole year from that money. So we were these amateur entrepreneurs, and we were actually better off than most people. And we were, like, by American standards, everybody was poor anyway, but we were sort of on the upper echelon, you know. we were able to build a little country house that we would go to in the summer outside of Moscow. It's a tiny little thing, actually. It's remarkable how little entrepreneurial, it was zero entrepreneurial energy and zeal in the Soviet Union. And that's why, you know, you can't create laws that create prosperity. It's impossible. You can only nurture a culture of entrepreneurship, and that creates prosperity. So when the government basically top down clamps down on that, it creates mediocrity and poverty and this paternalistic approach to people. You treat them as children, right? Everything needs to be provided by the government, and all creative energy is gone, right? So the average person in places like that are authoritarian, they see who is upwardly mobile. And in places like that, the only people that are upwardly mobile are people that are either directly or indirectly connected to the government. So they're all bureaucrats of some sort. So a child, and imagine a massive population of children, they go, well, who do I want to be? And the people that are the children that are ambitious, they become bureaucrats. If you go to the US, the children that are ambitious, they want to become entrepreneurs. And that is the difference. It's so simple. So freedom came to Russia, and it was super chaotic. There was an explosion of entrepreneurial activity, but right before that, I mean, everybody was poor. We're all in the same boat. So in the book, I describe sitting in high school in the classroom, and I was just bored out of my mind, pre-ADHD, right? And I would doodle. I would for some reason I would create these Western logos. I would just, make drawings of them, like Adidas and Nike. And I really liked the logo for Kiss, the band, with a double S, like a lightning double S. And I actually had my grandma, he didn't have any merch there, right? So my grandma made a wool hat for me, and I said, Grandma, I need you to put Kiss with a double. So she actually did it by hand. I was like, that's like my fashion statement. I mean, it's just unbelievable if you think about it, right? Like, you have no access to any of that. And so I would draw these logos, and for me, that was the image of prosperity, of opportunity, of creativity. These are bands that I would never see live. These were, Adidas was clothing that I didn't have any access to, that I would never own anything like it. Maybe if I get lucky, I'll get something in the black market, that kind of thing, right? But to me, it was like, it resonated with me. It was a symbol. It was an energy about those things that were calling me, right? And it was all Western cultural DNA. So when Russia became free, those of us who had that, right, who were like, just give me the freedom to undertake. So many of us became very, very successful in this vacuum where there's not a lot of people like that. And so for me, I went from drawing logos of Adidas to actually having an endorsement deal with Adidas and have posters of me in Adidas stores in Russia, and had an endorsement deal with Guess, the clothing line. I had an endorsement deal with Head and Shoulders with like this ad that I shot with. I had a lot of hair, right? You can find Christian Ray Flores Head and Shoulders or shampoo ad on YouTube. You're gonna love it. I promise you. It's gonna entertain you. Posters on, and it was multilingual. It was 15 different countries. All of these things, I was able to do. It was this massive leap, right? And I was drawing, I was writing the name of Michael Jackson. He had this logo of like 2 feet on like tippy toes with his shoes and the sparkling socks. And it was like a logo he had. And to me, that was just something so, I never thought I would ever see a live concert. And he was right here with me, serving these children where we're serving these orphans. It was unbelievable, right? And working with Kiss or George Duke and all these people that I would hang out with. I loved this band. CNC music factories in the 90s was that dance music. Everybody dance now. Bum, 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 bum. Everybody knows that song, right? Even now. Um, I loved them. So we would dance to that song and stuff like that. And then I find myself a few years later sharing the stage with them in a sports arena in Kiev, Ukraine. It's just so surreal. Anyway, so my point is this. My point is, in authoritarian countries, in lack of freedom, in lack of diversity of thought, um, initiative is punished. New ideas are suppressed. Censorship brings people down. Um, and in free countries, all of that is nurtured. All of that is just fertile soil for people who want to undertake. And the minute you give people freedom, the minute you allow them to create things and build something, some of the most talented people just pop up, right? I'll tell you a couple of stories that are just going to blow you away. In Russia in the 90s, I had, we have all these people that were dirt poor just like everybody else, and they were now billionaires within maybe 2-3 years. So I had a friend, who was a bass guitar player who married this big star, and I introduced him. He was my bass guitar player, and then he became a husband and a producer of this big star. And he lived in this posh sort of suburb where all the rich people live. And he tells me, this is, okay, from his words, he says, hey, a friend of mine, you're not going to believe it, a friend of mine, he said, hey, come over, I'm celebrating with a few friends, it's my birthday. So he's like wearing his sweats, and he was like, oh, sure, I'll come over. And he's thinking it's like a little get together with just, drink some vodka together, right, around the kitchen table or whatever, dinner table. So he shows up, and it is indeed a small gathering. It's not this big, massive party, but Sting is the entertainment. And according to my friend, again, Sting was paid $1 million to show up, to be there. And then he was tipped another $1 million for a job well done. So that's the kind of stories, those stories I heard over and over again. I've met some of those guys. I've met some of the oligarchs, some of the billionaires in Russia. And these were all extraordinarily creative, bold, very well-educated people that were just given the freedom to undertake. And yes, in many cases, some of the stuff that they did was super shady, and they took opportunities of all kinds of loopholes because it was complete chaos. But the point is, these people are always there, and if the environment doesn't allow them to express themselves, to pursue something, those talents, the ability to build something, create jobs, contribute to the economy is this dormant potential. It just doesn't happen. I met this is years later when we were already in the US. We're living in Los Angeles at the time. I was invited by a mutual friend who was an artist to hang out with this guy who was a billionaire. So he has this mansion in the Hollywood Hills, and we're just telling stories and all of that. And he made his fortune selling chicken legs in like chicken thighs or something like that, like frozen chicken thighs in Russia, and they bought it in America and they sold it in Russia. And I don't know why, but it became this huge business. And he basically said, just a few years before the fall of the Soviet Union, he was trading souvenirs to, American tourists outside of hotels. And that's how he made his money. And it was illegal, right? Everything was illegal, right? So he was like, fur hats or caviar and just sort of collectibles from that are Russian tourist things, right? So he would sell it to Americans or French people, tourists, and they would arrest them over and over again and throw them in a jail. And the hotels had actually a jail in the basement. So he says, one of those times, he goes, I'm in there, and the police that put him there, they were, sexually assaulting like a prostitute that was also put there. And he goes, I was trying to defend her, and I got beat up, right, by the police for doing that. And he says, I remember that guy because he beat me up, and, it's seared in my memory. He says that just a few years later, that police guy who beat me up, He's a concierge at a hotel that I own, and I recognize his face. And to me, that was just such an iconic story of meteoric rises for people that were entrepreneurial, and that's what happened, you know. And the other thing you told me is like, he goes, business was so good that we actually had in our building that we bought, we had a cash room. And I said, "What is a cash room?" He goes, "It's a room full of cash. If we needed cash, we would have the key to the room and we would get cash." And the room was literally full of cash. And we just laughed. It was just crazy. And the reason I tell you all these stories is that the culture in America, and obviously that's like in a vacuum. There's nothing, and then entrepreneurial people kick in and they make these fortunes. It's like the Wild West kind of scenario, right? But in normal, free societies, people who are bold, who are creative, who are inventive, who are, not too risk averse, they get the opportunity to create products, services, industries that elevate everybody else's boats. Like the fortunes of everybody are improved by people like that. And I pray that America stays entrepreneurial, because that's really the engine, right? That's why, I don't remember, it's like 5% of the population of the earth, which is America, creates 25% of the global GDP. Why? It's because the baseline is moved by people that dream big dreams, and they pursue them, and they usually fail several times before they succeed. And the environment, the culture tolerates that, celebrates that, even the failure, and allows people like that to do their work and to invest their talent. And I live in Austin, Texas now, and it's a very entrepreneurial place, right? So we work with founders, startup founders, tech founders, and we've done a lot of work with them, help them raise money, tell their story, position their product. Even in my sort of coaching program, which is high performance for professionals that are in that space, I just love helping them because I know their mind, their heart, their entrepreneurial spirit, and I know both the strengths of them and the weaknesses of them. So I help them increase their strength and diminish their weakness so they can do well, be high performing for longer, do their work better without losing their health, their family, their relationships. And I just love that. I really love this kind of person, right? I am that kind of person. And I was that kind of person way before I moved to the United States. I was just given the freedom in certain times of my life to actually fully express that. And what I want to tell you, if you're watching this, and I haven't bored you to death still while I tell you these stories, is that you have an assignment in life. You have it in you to create something for the rest of us. So it's not really necessarily a luxury or sort of the fate of the few who are extra driven, extra talented. I think everybody is born creative. Everybody is born entrepreneurial. And you owe it to the rest of us to find your mission in life. What are you here to do, right? Develop a vision, how you're going to get there, and create a solution for people like us with a service, a product, your art, whatever, that solves somebody's problem, brightens somebody's day, makes somebody happy, helps somebody get an education, inspires somebody. You owe it to the rest of us. And America undoubtedly is off the charts. There's nothing that even comes close in the world. Is a place to be that person, to be entrepreneurial and to undertake.